Hey everybody, it's Dr. Schulman. We're doing the appropriate assessments, using appropriate assessments. So this is the last one of assessments before you get to try to make some yourself and rate them. Isn't that exciting? So again, for the assessment ones, you're gonna have to do the project-based learning ones. You get to test like, I don't remember, like seven assessments, and then you get to make one. And then you also get to pick one from the other group. I remember last time I did this, everybody picked gamification. I totally get it. But let's go into it. I'm sharing my screen. So we are in Math for Teachers, and we're in the last one, which is different types of assessment. So when they're saying different types of assessment, the main thing is that you should keep in mind is what assessment would be ideally appropriate for your class or student based on their level of math understanding and their learning style. So that's what you should be asking yourself. What assessment would be ideally appropriate for your class and or student because it's not going to be the best for both and based on their learning style. The big thing that you should think about is choices, choices, choices. The more choices you can provide, the better it's going to be. So I usually gave a choice between a project or an exam, uh, creating a book or a final. Um, Basically, you should give your students as many choices as you think is reasonable because not everybody does. Right? Not everybody does good on all those paper tests that I was giving before. So the main thing that you should think about is like, oh, can they have an option for a project? Can they create a book? Now, other ways you can think about choice is can they explain it orally or instead of visually? A lot of students have a hard time writing it, but can explain what's going on. And that could be helpful. Another good thing you should think about is rubrics, especially if you're going to use other types or different types of assessment. A rubric's going to be your best friend. So what do I mean by rubrics? This will limit your bias and make sure you do not play favorites. No matter what, you're going to like some students more than others, just honest, right? There'll be some students you can't stand that get on your nerves, but you can't play favorites. You can't just be like, so the best thing I always do is I cover names and I use rubrics. And one thing that I always do is I treat every student as if it is a brand new day. So no matter what happened yesterday, they could have called you names, they could have gotten into a fight, they could have bit somebody, they could have gotten arrested, you could have threw them out for smoking, but you just treat every student as if it's a brand new day, and it usually goes well. So I might as well give you a rubric. Well, we've seen rubrics on all of them. So I'll start with this differentiation and modification. I'll go to the rubric for that. So this is my special education one. And if you did this one before, I know it was an option. So this is what the rubric looks like. And this is so I don't, guess what, play favorites with you. So I will cover the name when I read it. That's why I use Speed Grader on Canvas. So like I don't see the names, I just see the thing. So I look at introduction. Is it highly effective developing or not? Did they have a good working relationship with co-teachers? Did they explain it? Do they know how IEPs work? Do they know how 504s work? Did they do a good reflection? And was it formatted well? Out of 18. So this is just a rubric to keep me from playing favorites, especially on like a project or an assignment where you could like give leeway. A rubric is going to be really good to like make sure that you You don't play favorites with your students, okay? But basically, you should be giving them choices for assessments. And it should be like at their level as well. So the first thing is like, how can we differentiate versus modification? So what do those two words mean? What's the difference? Oh, okay, I guess I gotta download it. Is what it is. Um, Sometimes things like that happen. So let's get into it. So basically, modify here. I want to give the correct explanation for this. But this is a way you can alter assignments or alter standards just based on what your students are bringing to the table. Oh, is it because it's not updated? Did it disappear? You just open it with Google Docs? All right, well, things happen. Maybe because it's a big file. I'll try it one more time. Otherwise, we'll do the other one next. I need to update it. I don't know what's going on with it, but guess what? That's just technology, right? Let's go to a different drive because I know I have it everywhere. Sorry about that. Try one more time. There it is. I can see it hiding from me. All right, well, who knows what all that mess was about. But this is a great one, just talking about the needs for students that may have an IEP, an individual education plan, or a 504. This is a great one because you get to actually go through sample IEPs and 504s and see what they're like. So here we go. So an inclusive classroom is where all students learn in a general education environment for most of the day. It's a fully integrated. So this is where you might find yourself with a co-teacher, a specialist, or an aide to help you. Now, how can we make sure we do well? So this is the difference between accommodations and modifications, and this is how we can alter assessments. So accommodations are altering the same content to be inclusive for students with special needs. So this is like if I print it out really big for students, or if I make the Spanish version, or if I do this, have them have auditory for their assessments, or I let them have somebody who'll write for them, but I'll say, so basically it's this, we alter the same content standards for special needs. Sometimes that's not enough. Sometimes we have to modify it. Sometimes we have to change the content or material itself of what is expected to be learned. Taking out some standards, making the standards easier. If everybody works with a calculator, some students might don't get a calculator for something, you might give these students a calculator, right? That could be a really big modification, as everybody else has to use the calculator to solve it. So, but basically, this is altering the same standards, and this is it. So here are some common accommodations I've done. So some common accommodation I employ during a test day would be use of calculator. But that's a modification sometimes. That's not the best. Use of a formula sheet, that works. Taking the test in an alternate classroom, having extended time, allowing the use of notes or note cards. Some common accommodation I would employ during classroom learning would include allowing students a note taker, provide lecture digitally using an audio platform, access to a laptop, allowing students to have a stress pass. That was probably the best thing I've done. to leave the class when it became too stressful, providing transparent paper for easier spatial manipulation, using graphic organizers for note taking. So here are some modifications I've done. Cutting down or splitting assignments and activities to make them more manageable. So these students would get, guess what? Less assignments or easier assignments, providing worked out examples within the lessons, and having leveled activities for students. Extending time frame. So for, let's say it's a homework assignment, you could do this for tests. So they could have extending the time frames. And a modification would be grading for completion instead of for accuracy, or have different amount of problems. I've done these reviews, so short, medium, and long, and things like that. So all this stuff is like really useful for you to understand. Okay, so that's the main difference. So how can we be inclusive to differentiate? We can give students different leveled questions to modify different standards, or we could give them like help with the same standards, usefulness to make the same standards work out. Okay, hope that was clear. Okay, so let's look at differentiation. So I showed this before, but differentiating your types of assignments. Oh, it's doing this again. Does it work now? Okay. All right, well, I guess I got to do what I did before. So let's look at all right, we did the special education one. Oh, I should use this link instead, whatever one is the working link. Then I'll move it all over. All right, so here's a good way to do differentiation. See if this works. Okay, good. Oh no, it's doing the same thing. Okay, that's fine. Okay, so differentiation. So this is something you should really think about, just doing in general. I know I referenced this assignment before, but there we go. All right, so this is a really good way we can do differentiation. Okay, so equity is providing all students with individually tailored tools, which is really useful. So we have these three words. One, equity is providing students with individual tools and pathways to be successful. Accountability is showing the value of schoolwork, high stakes assessments to ensure that students are required for learning. So it's on the students to learn. And differentiation is creating varied levels of instruction and assessment to meet students' comprehension abilities. So that's the main idea, right? And we can do this with assessments. Can we make sure they're equitable? Like me giving the Spanish version of the exam to all my students who primarily spoke Spanish because I just wanted them to understand the math. Like I think that was a very equitable thing that I did. Accountability is like making sure that everybody was held accountable for still hitting those same standards. And this idea of differentiation, like for your assessments, especially if you're going to give them choices, make sure they're all at the same level, they're worth the same points, they require the same amount of work. So there's tons of strategies in here. So this is a big thing about accountability. It's not really related, but this is the main idea. No students come to classroom with the same skills, learning preferences, or aptitudes. That's the big idea. So you can do pre-assessments and formative assessments to gauge what students are ready for. Metacognitive assessments can provide feedback to what students understand and struggle with, and the pedagogical approach to help them succeed. So basically, these are all the things that are just saying students are really different. So how can we make sure that our assessments are rigorous, hits the content standards for students no matter their level, right? Are you grading for growth every time? Are you grading for accuracy every time? How are you coming to terms with how you're giving grades and things like that? So I hope that was useful. So let's see some of this in action. So instead of just doing that exam, right, those exams, this is like the one that you have to do yourself. So I'll just go over this intro, and then the next video will just be this idea. But basically, a differentiating or using different types of assessments, like one of the main things is project-based learning. So this instructional approach, I don't really feel like clicking on it, but this is just like a good resource. What is it? Why use it? Students, so teach students not the content, but skills. So they learn tons of skills for projects. It's have real tasks that brings challenges to solve. So I just think they're great. How's it used? How does it work? Here's characteristics of it. This is just a really good handout about it. And then like active learning, cooperative learning, everything in here is cool. So then there's a bunch of links. So, but basically, it's students create a tangible end product. That's the whole goal. So this is instead of writing on a test, they create an object, a game, a report, multimedia piece example that typifies what they were supposed to learn. The process involves an extended method and scope, multiple days to an entire unit where students meet an inquiry-based challenge. Okay, so usually it has research components, contacting experts. At the conclusion, they can present. So that's like the whole good thing about projects. And they get a sense of ownership. I think that's the best thing. It's like tailored to them. Students are so proud to show what they have. I not only would display the projects all over the room, but I'd also display it outside of the classroom so other people could see it. So they collaborate, creative thinking, effective communication, building math identity. So it says it outperformed traditional curriculum. I just like using it, but it depends on what kind of teacher you are, like these are just options, but you should be aware of the options you have. So it's it's effective in preparing for high-stake exam, beneficial for low-performing and learners, and provide integration, innovation, and collaboration. So this is research that says all these good things about it. But what are drawbacks? So limited direct instruction, yep. And they could have lower learning outcomes. So there's drawbacks to every approach. So you should be careful when you're planning this, have clear direction, specific goals, a solid foundation, and the ability can be it should be directions are really key. Facilitating this is key. I failed a lot trying these. So basic, and there's rubrics for all of them. So the way that this works is that you get to rate a bunch of alternative assessments, and you'll be given a series of 7 projects to read through and rate. I'll go through them in the next video. And then you get to create your own. So these are the ones I'm going to go over next video and show you the rating. Then you get to create your own. So we've got song lyrics, Pinata Party, The Torch, a storybook, gambling, stat survey, kite flying, and a pixel party. Cool, right? All right. So that was the end of this video because I want to separate it. But basically, for different types of assessments, they could be projects. You can use the different learning styles, but they should be like optional. You should always give your students an opt-out. I always had a test at the ready or another assignment. If a student didn't want to do the project or they didn't want to get involved, I'd be like, here's a computer, this is your Delta Math, or here's an exam to do, because you should be differentiating based on what your student skills are. All right, well, I hope this was a helpful video. I hope you learned something, and feel free to reach out if you have questions.